I had a slide presentation, but we really don't have time for it, so let me give a short version of it. I think all of you know I'm a university professor and have been for 41 years. I'm going to bite the hand that feeds me and bite it really hard. And it'll probably slap back. But it's a hand that has fed me very well, comfortable level of income, benefits, good retirement system, tenure, and all of that most people don't have. But there are problems and issues with the land grant. My experience talking to students and groups of people outside the university is that they're very eager to have meaningful give and take discussion on alternative food systems. You know what's good and bad about industrial agriculture? And there's a whole range of others. You know many of them. That discussion rarely occurs in a land-grant university setting. Land-grant Kansas State, Missouri, Auburn, Oklahoma State, and so forth. The land-grant system was created 151 years ago, intended for teaching, research, and outreach and service for the middle class, for common people, for working class. It had a public interest orientation. It was enormously successful in the early days. But things have changed. And the system, in my opinion, all of this is oversimplifying, but it's gone from being outward-looking to being inward-looking. You thought the land-grant system was for you, and it was. That's what it was intended for and how it behaved up until the last 20 or 30 years. It's no longer about you. It's about me. Faculty. Be a professor. Advance my own career. How do I advance my career? Teaching, research, and service. Outreach. Administrators give a lot of lip service to it. No credit. Teaching. That's what most university professors are paid for. In agriculture, we get more research and outreach dollars. They're not rewarded for teaching. You've got to be a really, really bad teacher to be penalized in the university system. An outstanding teacher may get a small increment in salary and some other perks, but very little. Research is what it's about, but even that is very narrowly defined. Now, essentially all accounts are refereed journal articles written by academics for other academics. They're trying to impress other academics rather than to deal with your problems. Another thing that has happened is specialization. The way to become an expert is to work in a narrowly defined area. You know, people working in narrowly defined areas don't want to stand up and talk about different food systems and so forth, because they're not going to be rewarded for it. So, it boils down to, in most land-grant universities, two things count toward building a career, getting salary increases, getting tenure, and all of those perks. Referee journal articles written for other academics, dollars, outside dollars. Who's got the money? The working class, the middle class that the system was intended for don't have the money. Corporate America has the money. And what can happen, and often happens, is that corporations put a certain amount of money in for research of a particular type done by a particular professor or group of them. That pulls all the taxpayer dollars, state and federal taxpayer dollars, over to work on the problems of corporate interest, which may or may not be the real issues that need to be researched for common people. And it's worse because the granting agencies, USDA, National Institute of Health, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, academics have a big influence there. So the academics are, to some extent, determining where the taxpayer dollars go for research. So it's been a great system for me. I've done well. Let me read you a news release from a couple of weeks ago related to the Farm Bill. I'm quoting Christina Butts, NCBA. Not trying to pick on NCBA, but this one jumped out at me. This is in reference to one of the draft farm bills. This is truly the first time in history where we have revamped what agricultural research will look like. So the private sector can put in private dollars, which are leveraged with federal dollars, and there will be a board designated by academics, as well as public-private partnership. What public? Will it be common people? No. Probably not very many of them. A board designated by academics as well as public-private partnership to further kind of align what the goals of USDA should be from an agricultural research perspective. Will federal dollars leverage private dollars? Does anybody here believe that? Or will private dollars leverage federal dollars? Hang on just a minute. Incentives of deans and other ag administrators are not unlike they are for faculty. And right now, tremendous pressure to get dollars. The taxpayer dollars are declining. Ag faculty numbers are rapidly declining, and more corporate money coming into programs. Some universities are even setting up gift accounts for individual faculty have gift accounts. And a corporation, if they want a really good prof, they can put in maybe $50,000 a year. If they want some that are not quite that good, a couple of thousand. And in essence, have quite a bit to say about what the faculty member does. So any effort to have meaningful discussion about alternative food systems, give and take and so forth, will not in general come from the land grant system. It's going to come from people and groups like you. As you gain success, the land grants will kind of follow along, especially if you have a few dollars. So it's a system that has been enormously successful in its history for improving the lives of most everybody. Parents, grandparents, most everybody in this room have greatly benefited from the system. Rather than being outward looking with a focus on the public interest, it's now inward looking. And it's going to be a challenge to change that. So we'll see if I have a job when I get back.
If the research is monetized, what portion of that ends up going to the corporations that provide that feed? And what portion goes back into the land and be used for the people that it's meant to be used for?
I can't give you any hard numbers. Most of you who have tried to work with land grant administrators or faculty know you can find faculty here and there that will work with you and maybe not even ask for money. It's certainly growing. It's become a grant type economy within the agricultural system. When federal funds started declining, all of the administrators in their infinite wisdom wanted to keep people. So early on in my career, there were faculty positions, but the faculty had something to work with. They could go out and do field experiments and other things and have the resources there. But because with declining federal funds, which declined for a variety of reasons, complex reasons, but with that decline, administrators wanted to keep faculty, so the faculty are left with salaries and nothing to work with. So to get something to work with, you got to get grants from USDA or federal or state court or whatever. Brings up another thought. There are a lot of ag programs in land-grant universities that are explicitly prohibited from going to the legislature for money. Auburn is one of those. Auburn Ag cannot go to the legislature for money because Ag would get proportionally more and the rest of the university system would get less. So they won't even let that, won't let, Illinois was another one. They wouldn't allow Ag to go to the legislature for funding. So it's really become a grant type economy, and any merit raises are based on the referee journal articles and on grant monies obtained. Because of the narrow specialization, you cannot get a comprehensive long-term research program up and running because of the dollars and because of faculty incentives. It might take 5 or 10 years to get any productivity articles and reports out of that, which might make a huge contribution, but along the way the faculty are penalized because they don't have referee journal articles. Some of them are down to 3-page fill-in-blank journal articles. So it's a system that has greatly benefited me.
It seems to me that we've gone from a system that began with allowing private sector interests to be able to fill out the remaining balance of the needed dollars for a research project that had undue influence over the direction and the outcome of the primarily funded public taxpayer-funded research project. So that extra 2% or 4% or 5%, whatever it took to finish off that project, the folks who provided that had a lot of influence. And so while we started out there and it's kind of corrupting influence, we've now gotten to the point where, to me, as I look at it, I look at who puts up how much, what money, and who owns the product at the end of the activity. And so now we're seeing, at least before, we as folks who are supposed to be served by the land grant system, the land and the people of the state of Nebraska, for example, in the charter of the University of Nebraska, to where we at least own the research product at the end. And now we're seeing our folks on the cheap, using our time, money, and resources on the cheap, doing custom work for private sector interests who then own that intellectual property. And
exactly.
To me, that is an absolute massive change and represents something that just is reprehensible.
Right. It's taking the corporate grant and it's pulling all of the taxpayer significant state and federal taxpayer dollars over here for a research project and the results of that are proprietary. Stated in slightly different words, but it's what the point John was.
Fewer and better.
That might be better, more academic.
Don, University of Kansas, so I'm not a land grant school, but problems you outline are the same for all universities.
All public universities, yes, they are.
Part of the problem too is that taxpayers are supporting less and less of higher education. So in Kansas now, about 15% of our money comes from taxpayers, from the legislature, and the rest must be generated by your Coke school from tuition. And so it's a circular thing that continues to cause problems. And the taxpayers are not supporting higher education.
Because higher education is not supporting them.
Well, I don't know if it's chicken or egg, it's not happening.
Right.
And so that means that we have to turn more and more to the private sector for support, not just for research, but for basic education.
Another effect of the early success of the land grant system is it led to a lot of public non-land grant universities. And so you take the federal and taxpayer dollars, and rather than them going to focus on the land grant mission, get spread to a lot of other universities. So there's a lot to explain declining real support. At the same time, inflation adjusted, this is in my retirement system bulletin, inflation adjusted cost of college education at a public university has gone up 200%, which means it's increased threefold in 25 years. Why? Part of that is due to declining taxpayer support, but it's also due to a lot of brick and mortar subsidizing research out of tuition and fees and high executive salary. Auburn's football coach gets $4 million or so, but the president, who's a Hort grad of Auburn, gets a couple of million a year. Deans get $250,000 plus all the benefits and so forth. Faculty salaries adjusted for inflation have been fairly flat. I'm not complaining in any way about where it is, but a bunch of these others have been going up, and up.
It's one of the things that's going to come down is the privatization of all things published by other means. When we see privatization of our public school system going on, it's rampant, supported by some of the biggest philanthropic organizations in the world, including Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and lots of other folks. But it's, all these things that were built by the public, for the public, are being co-opted now by private interests and becoming more and more private.
Yes.
Not only in their everyday functioning, but in the outcomes that arrive. And it's I might add, it's a complete undermining of the whole purpose of education. Education is to make us all be able to think instead of being trained.
To memorize.
We're being trained for those jobs and functions that private corporations would have us do.
There's a lot of that. You mentioned Bill Gates. I have another slide. Last year, there was a big convocation in Washington, D.C. to celebrate 150 years of the land grant system. Who was the keynote speaker? Bill Gates. There were about 500 people in attendance. Chancellors, presidents, deans, a few people with money. Were there any common people? They weren't even invited. And I'm quoting from the Association of Public Land Grant Universities, all they sent out. They promised a dynamic set of discussions that will help set the agenda for the next 150 years of public higher education. Who's setting the agenda? Bill Gates and people of money and some administrators.